But I think, it's important, the idea of creating space is really important, and it's been incredibly important for Black folks in Oregon, again, in a place that told us we would be tortured if we stayed. And over 100 Black people heard that, when the Black exclusion law passed, and they stayed, or they came. That, to me, is the height of courage and bravery. And they made it possible for me to be here. I would not be here if it was not for those over 100 Black folks who heard, we will publicly torture you until you leave, and they said, well, I'm not leaving, so what are we gonna do about this, right? So the Black community has always been here, and the Black community has always built. And so, specifically looking at the experience of the Black community in Portland, again, becomes a useful case study for the rest of the nation. Because if we look at the patterns of containment, of redlining, of segregation, of urban renewal, and then of gentrification, we see the same things happening, as you were saying, across the country. And so I'm gonna just do this super briefly, and I'm gonna share a resource with you that talks a lot more in depth about it, just because this could have been the whole presentation and more. But the first Black community actually came around the train station, around Union Station, because the majority of Black folks came with the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad. And so the first sort of Black institution that really took root was the Golden West Hotel, because all of Portland was closed to Black folks. Portland was considered to be the most segregated city north of the Mason-Dixon line. So the most segregated city outside of the South, Portland. The entirety of downtown was closed to Black folks. Black folks could not get a room, could not see a doctor, could not get a shoe shine, a haircut, nothing. So institutions like the Golden West Hotel sprung up to address those needs. And while it was a hotel, it quickly also became a community center. So this building still exists in downtown Portland and Northwest, and there's actually information on the outside of it about the Golden West. There's also an online component that you can check out. So if you look up the Golden West Hotel, you can hear audio from folks who stayed at the Golden West Hotel, from the owners of it. You can learn more about it. So I think, again, in terms of the physical manifestations, people walk by this building every day and have no idea that this was the heart of the Black community, the first Black community in Portland. But the downtown expanded, that land became desirable, and Black folks were displaced. They were displaced across the Broadway Bridge to Lower Albina, which is where the Moda Center is right now. So if you go to see Blazers or whatever. I went to see the dinosaurs walking around. Something about me. That was the heart of the Black community. And Black folks were only allowed to buy or rent in that area due to redlining. The practice literally of drawing red lines around a map and saying within this area is the only place that Black folks and sometimes other folks of color can buy or rent. And it's usually the least desirable part of town. So redlining made that the place that Black folks lived. Black people made it the heart of the Black community. Under the worst of conditions, they created a thriving, strong community. And just one thing I want to highlight with that is it became known as a jazz treasure nationally. So folks would come and play in Portland. All the greats played in Portland. You could hear jazz 24 hours a day on North Williams Avenue. And I think that this, to me, is such a powerful symbol of the culture of resistance that folks created. Again, in a situation where they're overexploited and under-resourced, they still created this beautiful culture of resistance that everyone acknowledged as something powerful nationally. So we have that as, and I'm skipping over so much. We have that Lower Albina as the heart of the Black community right up until around 1955, 1956. And this is the piece that I would encourage everyone to read, Bleeding Albina by Karen Gibson. It is an incredible piece looking at the process of gentrification and containment in the Black community. She does an amazing job of connecting this with the national landscape as well. Because again, what happens in 1956 is the Black community, the heart of the Black community is demolished to put in the Memorial Coliseum. It is literally dropped on top of the black community. North Williams, which again was the heart of the black community, is cut in half and basically left to bleed to death. At the same time, the highways go in. And this is the part that's important for everyone and useful for, I think, for Lake Oswego. The reason highways are going in across this country is because of the suburbs, the creation of the suburbs, right, which started during World War II. The suburbs were created as a place for white people to get away from the city, to get away from people of color, to get away from crime, to be able to build the sort of utopia that they had dreamed of. Sounds familiar, right? That's the foundation of Oregon as a state, the racist white utopia. The vast majority of suburbs were sundown suburbs, sundown towns, which meant black folks and other people of color were not allowed to live there, including Lake Oswego, right? It was written into the covenants of people's homes, and I've seen people's covenants from Lake Oswego, black people who own a home here, and their covenant says, you are not, like black folks are not allowed to enter Lake Oswego except as domestic servants. That is in, you know, the paperwork for the home that they own in Lake Oswego. The reason highways go in is because people need quick ways to come back from the suburbs to their jobs in the cities, right? So highways go in across this nation, right? And so it's incredibly important to recognize that this process that's happening in Portland is happening in, you know, New York, as was said, LA, Chicago, Detroit, across this nation, because of the creation of these new spaces called the suburbs, places where white folks wanted to go and build perfect, idealized communities. And there's a great book called Sundown Towns by James Lowen. And he has an entire section where he talks about the suburbs, because he says the highest percentage of sundown towns, which again are purposely all white towns that are policed by violence or threat of violence. The idea of sundown towns, again, we often think, oh, it's something in the South or in rural areas. He's like, the biggest number of sundown towns is the suburbs, right? Is where people with money who could get out went. That is the biggest number of sundown towns. And he actually has a great online project where if you just Google sundown towns, this is the first page that comes up. This map is an interactive map. So you can click on it, and then it'll have a list of towns that they have evidence are sundown towns for the state that you clicked on. So I did a tour 2 years ago of rural Oregon, and I clicked on this map during the presentation every time, and every single one of those towns was on that map, and people were not, they were like, oh. There was one that wasn't, and I was like, y'all, you're not on the map, and they're like, we should be. But I think, again, this is really important, because I think that oftentimes the suburbs think of it as separate from the cities, but recognizing that the suburbs and their existence indelibly shape racial politics of cities, that there is no way to walk away from that accountability or that